Alright, welcome back to all my tiny tots, little ones, big kids, tweens, teens, everyone in between, CGs, flips, and adults. So today we are reading chapter 36, 37, 38, 39, and 40. That's a lot of chapters, but it's okay. We're gonna work through it. So we're starting off with chapter 36, Unfinished Symphony, Little Wilbur, CG Dadza, and Others. Wilbur woke up. He couldn't remember the last 24 hours. In fact, the last thing he could remember was visiting Dream at his home, and then everything after that was a blur. Wilbur sat up, pushing himself up into a sitting position. His hands burned as they made contact with the soft sheets on his bed. He looked down at his hands and noticed them tightly bandaged. He didn't know what happened to them either. He stood up carefully, testing his balance before making his way out of the room he didn't recognize. Outside of his room, there was a long, narrow hallway dimly lit by a few bulbs on the verge of death, along with windows that let in the natural light. Wilbur made his way down the hall, fingertips lightly running over the paneling on the walls as he walked. He came to the end of the hallway and cautiously peered out the other side. To his left was an open kitchen space with a glass door at the far back of it, next to the fridge. On his right, he found a living area, complete with a few overstuffed sofas. Directly in front of him, Wilbur found the dining area, a long birch table long enough to fit, after he counted each and every chair, 22 people. He took a sharp breath in as he noticed the frames on the walls above the table, pictures of Phil's and his wife, and other pictures of the Crowfather with his children. Wilbur let a small smile grace his face before he stepped further into the unfamiliar home. He caught sight of a person on his left and quickly whipped around. It was Philza. Hey, mate, did you sleep all right? Philza asked. Wilbur nodded, his thumb finding its way into his mouth as he nervously bit at his nails. Philza quickly got up, carefully swatting the boy's hands away from his mouth. Nuh-uh, sweetheart, that's icky. Let's get you a teether instead, he asked quietly. Wilbur felt his brain do that weird thing. He didn't know what to call it, where he felt all childish. He nodded a bit and made grabby hands towards Philza. Phil smiled a bit and scooped his son up into his arms. How old are you feeling, kiddo? He asked quietly. Wilbur thought for a moment before shrugging. He wasn't used to this feeling. It had happened a couple times before, but only when he was super stressed or about to go to bed. Philza nods and makes his way up the stairs, stepping outside of a closed door a ways down from the room Wilbur had woken up in. Phil opened the door and headed inside, grabbing a teether out of the stand drawer. It had been a while since he had watched over any littles. He handed the teether to Wilbur, who took it and began gnawing on it. Phil nodded approvingly. That was much better than the boy's fingernails. Will let out a small whine, pulling at the collar of his button-down shirt. Phil cooed softly. Let's get you changed into something more comfortable. Pumpkin? He spoke softly. Will nodded, quickly agreeing to get out of the uncomfortable clothes. Phil opened up the closet and looked through the various clothing items hanging there before picking out a soft cotton onesie and a pair of jegging material overalls. He carefully laid Wilbur down on the changing table and helped him undress out of his uncomfortable button-down and jeans and into the cotton onesie and jegging material overall shorts. Wilbur babbled nonsense and with quiet bouts of joy as he laid on the table patiently. Once Phil was done, he picked Wilbur up and kissed his forehead. Such a darling baby, he cooed before setting Wilbur down on the floor. Wilbur babbled and giggled softly. Phil smiled, thinking over something in his head. I had to do some shopping today, but I suppose I can't leave you home alone, Phil murmured, chuckling quietly as he watched Wilbur try, but not succeed in walking on his own. Wilbur turned towards Phil, making small grabby hands towards the other. Phil picked the younger up, resting the boy on his hip. Wilbur rested his cheek on Phil's shoulder as he walked down the stairs, the young boy still resting in his arms. Once downstairs, he opened the main house door after pulling on some shoes. He figured the younger wouldn't be walking much anyway and set off outside, prepping his wings for flight as he cradled the little in his arms, shielding his eyes from the bright light and the smoky remains that floated through the air. Wilbur felt his eyes drooping shut as his body relaxed, and the sound of his father figure's heartbeat rang calmly through his ears. Phil landed a while later in town square, just off the main path and a few feet away from Nikki's bakery. He made his way into her shop. Hey, Nikki, I need 2 loaves of bread, please, Phil greeted as she heard the bell ring, signaling his arrival. She nodded and grabbed the requested items before softly cooing at the boy in the older's arms. Aw, is he all tuckered out? She asked quietly. Phil nodded. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, just like when he was younger. Flight always knocked him out. Phil plopped a few coins on the counter before taking the bread. Thanks, Nikki, he said as he walked out of her shop. You're welcome. Come back again soon, Nikki answered. Phil made his way back onto the main path and started down the street for Puffy's trading shop. He could usually find small stuffed animals and hidden treasure maps there, as well as the few odd souvenirs from her journeys. Puffy looked up as the bell rang in her shop, eyes widening as she noticed the boy in Phil's arms. "What are you doing with him?" Off in my own world. Puffy demanded quietly. Philza sighed. "I just came here to pick up a few things for the kid. I'll leave right after, I promise." Puffy scowled but agreed anyways, watching Philza's every move as he walked about the shop, picking up the things he would need after not having taken care of a little in so long. He finished up and placed things on the counter, allowing Puffy to total up the expenses, before trading her 2 sheep spawners. Her eyes widened as she caught sight of them. "Where'd you get these?" she demanded. Philza shrugged, collecting his purchase and making his way out of the shop. His next stop would be at Sapnap's and George's house. They had asked him to help them figure a few things out. He changed direction, heading towards Kanoko Kingdom. It was now a mostly abandoned country, but Carl, Sapnap, and George still lived there, along with Dream XD on the few occasions that he stopped into town. Wilbur awoke, feeling a bit older and able to walk on his own. He looked up at his papa with wide eyes. "Papa, where are we going?" he asked quietly. "Papa promised to help Sapnap and George with a few things. It won't take long, and if you get bored, you could probably go hang out with Charlie in Las Nevadas," Phil responded, internally overjoyed that his son had called him Papa, as the boy hadn't called him that since he was very young. Wilbur nods and continues to walk alongside Phil. Soon enough they reach Sapnap and George's country, Kanoko Kingdom. Excuse-moi. Carl takes Wilbur to keep him entertained as Sapnap glares after the two, a look of dislike and possibly hatred, crossing over his features. "Why the we're blurring out that word for the little ones. Did you bring him?" Sapnap demanded, jerking his chin towards Wilbur and Carl, who were still wandering down the path. "Excuse me? We'll be out of here soon enough. Will is currently little. If you have an issue with that, I'll grab my sin. Wow, I'm so bad at reading today. Wow, okay. I'll grab my son and we'll leave right now," Phil said, trying to contain the anger that was welling up inside of him. "Did you forget what he did to your country?" Sapnap retorted. Phil clenched his fists at his sides. "I have not forgotten, rather forgiven. Now either you tell me what you asked me to come here to do, or I leave right now," Philza answered grimly. Sapnap let out a heavy sigh and nodded, leading Philza away from the entrance to Kanoko Kingdom. Meanwhile, Wilbur had heard the heated conversation and gazed up at Carl with wide eyes. "Ka, why are they so angry?" he asked, messing with the hem of his sleeve. Carl knelt down in front of Wilbur and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Well, sometimes people just get mad. But that's okay, because it's okay to feel things." Wilbur nods as George approaches them and motions for Carl to move away to converse for a moment. Wilbur decides he's going to visit Charlie and Quackity in Las Nevadas and makes his way back out to the prime path and down the road a few blocks until he reaches the big sign that says, "Welcome to Las Nevadas." He giggles quietly to himself and wanders in. He finds the casino where Charlie works as a bartender and takes a seat at one of the stools, his legs gently swinging back and forth as he sits. He quietly gnaws on his cheating toy as he processes what Carla had told him. His papa hadn't known it either, but he was awake when him and Puffy were talking. Wilbur wasn't sure why everyone was so angry with him. He hadn't done anything wrong. He managed to get Lamanberg to be a country, an independent country. A voice suddenly pulled him out of his thoughts. "Will?" Charlie asked. Wilbur looked up, meeting eyes with Slimesicle. "Hey there, kiddo. You all right?" Charlie said, "Oh my god." Charlie said quietly, using a sigh. Oh my. I don't want to do a full retake of this. Hold on, y'all. Pause. I don't know where the seal is. I don't know where the seal is. Hold on. Well, it's not my fault you're deaf. Okay. Problem solved. Alright. We'll see if I can get it open. It opened nicely. Yay. Okay. We should be good now, I think. Hey there, kiddo. You alright? Charlie said, quietly using a soothing tone. Wilbur nodded, feeling himself slip smaller. Charlie smiled and pulled out a coloring book and some crayons. How about we go see the big boss? He's in his office and he's not busy for the next couple of hours. Charlie asks. Wilbur nods and giggles, making grabbing hands towards Charlie. Slimesicle smiles and picks the younger up, resting him on his hip. He grabs the coloring book and crayons and takes them with him and Wilbur to Quackity's office on the second floor of the building. He knocks on the door before opening it, where he finds Quackity sitting at his desk reviewing some paperwork. Slimesicle offers a smile and then walks in all the way. Hey, boss man, I have a visitor for you. He wanted to come up and say hi and hang out for a bit, Slimesicle said once he was sure Quackity was listening. He placed Wilbur down on the couch in Quackity's office and handed him the book and crayons. Behave for Quackity, all right, Bug? Slimesicle asked. Wilbur nods and Charlie smiles before leaving the room, shutting the door quietly behind him. Quackity glances over at the Little, sitting on his couch before getting up and walking over to the couch, sitting down beside the Little. What you coloring, little man? He asked quietly. Wilbur held up the book to show a picture of a purple puppy with a pink kitty for a friend. That's awesome, little dude. You should teach me how to color like that sometime. Wilbur giggled and finished coloring his picture, then handed the book to Quackity. Help, please, he requested. Quackity tore the picture out of the book and handed both the book and the picture back to Wilbur. Wilbur handed the picture to Quackity and flipped through the book to find a new page to color. This went on for a couple of hours until Philza arrived with Slimesicle, who had escorted him to Quackity's office. At his side, Philza broke out into a smile when he saw a napping Wilbur and Quackity cuddled up on the couch together in Quackity's office. Slimesicle smiled as well. Philza pulled out his phone and snapped a quick picture before carefully picking up the Little. Thanks for watching him, Alex, he said as Quackity's eyes fluttered open before closing again. You're welcome. We had a blast, Quackity mumbled as he fell back asleep. Philza smiled and headed back down to the main floor, then outside, taking off on his wings and flying back home. He expected Techno to be home now and was hoping that he might help look after Wilbur and get him tucked into bed later on that evening. But until then, he focused on that specific moment, his sleeping son in his arms, under his safety and his protection. He was happy. Once he arrived home, Philza landed carefully on the house's porch, walking inside and quietly shutting the door behind himself. He walked up the stairs, slipping the Little into his bed and tucking him in. He kissed his forehead, whispering a soft good night before leaving the room. The door cracked just a bit. He couldn't have asked for a better little one. Chapter 37, CG Dream Little Technoblade. Disclaimer, this one was inspired by another story on Wattpad. So, I can't really tell you the name of it or who it's by right now, because I read it a really long time ago, but this story just kind of always stuck with me. So, yeah. I mean, I didn't try to copy it, I swear. I just took, like, the main idea and added in my own kind of, like, twist, almost. So, yeah. Hope that helps. He heard the baby monitor go off and sat up, rubbing the remaining sleep from his eyes. His piglin hadn't gotten much sleep the night before, so they had both needed a nap that morning. Dream couldn't figure out what was bothering Techno. Something was irritating him, making it so he couldn't sleep. That's when it finally dawned on him. His baby was teething. He had recently lost his tusks and new ones were growing in. But being in little space, the pain was more grand than usual because he was more sensitive when he felt smaller. Dream quickly got up and dialed Puffy, aka the duckling's mama, and hoped that she could help him out. Dream didn't have anything for when Techno was feeling smaller than 5. He mentally cursed himself for not preparing, but reasoned that he had never needed it before, as Techno's little age was anywhere from 4 to 11 years old. Puffy finally picked up as Dream entered the Little's playroom, where a separate bed was set up for nap time. Duckling, what's up? Puffy asked from her end of the line. Hey, Mom, I think Techno's teething and I don't have anything that could help him. Could you maybe pick up some water teethers from the market and I'll pay you back later? Dream requested as he picked Techno up, carefully bouncing the boy. Sure, be there in 10, Puffy responded before hanging up. Dream let out a soft sigh and slipped his phone into his back pocket. How about some applesauce, kiddo? He asked Techno quietly. Techno nodded, babbling a bit before soft whimpers left his mouth. I know, sweetheart, I know, Dream murmured as he gently swayed back and forth, kissing his Little's forehead. He then headed down into the kitchen, humming a soft lullaby as Techno messed with one of his hands. All right, kiddo, Daddy has to put you down for a second, Dream said quietly, giving Techno a slight heads up before setting him down on the counter and grabbing him a cup of applesauce out of the cupboard along with a spoon. Techno whined a bit, reaching out for Dream. Dream cooed lightly, quickly returning to his baby's side before opening up the applesauce and dipping the spoon into it. Excuse-moi. After Techno had eaten, Dream filled him a bottle with water and set him on his playmat in the living room, where he was currently laying on his back, looking up at the small mobile that hung from the arch of the mat. His fingers reached up, trying to grab the small stuffed figures that hung from the arch: a crown, a sheep, a pair of discs, and a wither. The doorbell rang. Almost 15 minutes later, Dream quickly opened the door to find his mom standing there, bag hanging from the crook of her arm. Hey, Mom, thanks again for this, Dream said as he greeted his mom with a quick hug. Puffy smiled, returning the hug almost immediately. Of course, Duckling. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't help you out every once in a while? Dream chuckled lightly, shrugging a bit. Puffy smiled and pinched his cheeks lightly before handing the bag that was hanging from the crook of her arm to him. Talk to you later, kiddo. Your old mom has some treasure to find, Puffy said dramatically as she bounded out the door and back the way she had come. Dream chuckled quietly to himself before closing the door and taking a teether out of the bag. Placing the others in the freezer, he knew that his piglin would be much more at ease after this. He walked into the living room and knelt down by the little one, placing the teether in his hands. The little quickly latched onto it, chewing on it as he used his free hand to try and once again grab the items hanging from the mobile. Dream cooed lightly and scooped the little up off of his playmat and held the little one close to his chest as he quietly hummed while swaying and slightly dancing around the room. Around the living room, sorry. I do know that Techno had a boundary that he didn't like being shipped with other characters. I apologize for violating this. It just worked out better, or it just kind of morphed into this in the end, so I apologize. Do you remember when we used to dance like this, Bubba? Dream asks quietly, watching the little's wide, unblinking eyes stare back up at him. Dream smiled before continuing. That was a few months ago, during a simpler, stress-free time. Dream sighs quietly as he continued to hum the soft tune, listening to his little one's small babbles and broken words. The world may not have made much sense to him anymore, but he wouldn't change it for anything. He loved his piglin and looking after him whenever he could. He would never change a single thing about what he did. He knew that if he had, this moment never would have happened. Dream stopped swaying and looked down at the little, who was now fast asleep in his arms, teether hanging limp in his delicate, scarred hands. Dream smiled lightly at his baby's sleeping form before carrying him upstairs and laying him down in his crib. He pulled the soft pink blanket up over the little and whispered a soft good night before leaving the room. Dream made his way back downstairs. He tidied up the living room and worked on a few small chores that still needed to be done for the day. He smiled to himself as he worked. He couldn't wait for his baby to wake up. He had so much planned already. I think it actually might be 5 chapters today, so y'all get a bonus. I didn't count right. I think it was supposed to be 37 through 40, because 37, 38, 39, yeah, that would have been 4 chapters. Whoops, my bad. Well, y'all are lucky like that. Alright. Chapter 38, Bench Duo. CG, Tubbo, Little Tommy in it. And this one is like... So this idea came based from a TikTok sound. You know the one where it's like... Can I get a meh? And there's like... The response of meh. It's kind of like that. Just a bit different. Because, I don't know how many of you know this, but like it's like fanon that Tubbo is a goat hybrid, so that's kind of where this idea incorporated into. So yeah, there you go. There's the story behind this. Tommy was small, sitting on the floor playing stuffies as Tubbo watched over him, scrolling through his phone and looking up occasionally. After a while, Tommy got bored. He waddled up to Tubbo, putting on the best puppy dog eyes he could muster before approaching the ram hybrid completely. Bubba, do the thing, please? Tommy begged, his puppy dog face becoming more convincing by the second. Tubbo looked up at Tommy, the boy's face pulling at his heartstrings. Okay, goodness, Bubba, you're gonna kill me with that face one of these days, Tubbo answered. Yay! Tommy celebrated to Tubbo's answer. Tubbo smiled, doing his goat noise that Tommy loved to hear when he was little. Tommy giggled. Again! Tubbo complied, answering Tommy with another meh. Tommy squealed, giggling and jumping into Tubbo's lap. Tubbo smiled and wrapped his arms around the little. You want to watch Up? Tubbo asked as the little settled in for the long haul. Tommy nodded, chewing on his sleeve as Tubbo turned the movie on. Tubbo caught notice of this and gently swatted Tommy's hand away, replacing it with a, I was supposed to say jewelry, but my autocorrect is stupid. So there you go. Before the little could whine. Wow, I'm so bad at talking today. Tommy did a small happy stim as the movie started up. He quietly babbled along, having seen the movie so many times he could recite the lines by heart, even though he found wonder in enjoying the movie every time he watched it. Tubbo pulled his blanket off the back of the couch, wrapping it around the little. He began to slowly trace shapes along the little spine, smiling as the little giggled and melted into his touch. Sooner rather than later, the little started drifting off, his head resting limply against Tubbo's shoulder. Tubbo chuckled lightly, and noticing that the little was asleep. He turned the movie off and carefully picked Tommy up, carrying him up the stairs to his bedroom. He laid the little down on his bed, carefully tucking him in and whispering a soft, "Sleep well." Chapter 39, CG Puffy Little Nihachu. A warm summer morning led Nikki, feeling way too warm under the blankets and next to her caregiver. She quietly slipped out of bed and down the hall to her playroom. She pulled out her blocks and dolls, making the dolls a castle as time passed. After around an hour, she had finished her castle and set the dolls within, putting her dinosaurs on the outside to guard the royal family from bad guys. Once she was sure that the family would be safe, she made her way back to the bedroom. She climbed onto the bed, nestling into her CG side. "Papa," she whined quietly. Puffy's eyes cracked slightly, catching sight of her little after a moment. "Hey, Princess, what's wrong?" Puffy asks, concerned. "Was lonely and hungry. We makes foods," she answers. Puffy smiles, sitting up and pulling her little into her lap. "Sure, sweetheart." She climbs out of bed and rests Nikki on her hip as she walks down the 2 flights of stairs to the main floor. "What do you want for breakfast, kiddo?" she asks. "Waffles, please," Nikki responds, bouncing in Puffy's arms a bit. Puffy cracks another smile as she sets Nikki down on the counter carefully. "Sure, kiddo, we can make waffles," she answers. She grabs out the box of waffle mix, a measuring cup in the waffle maker. She measures out the waffle mix and pours it into a bowl, then adds in the necessary amount of water before handing a whisk to Nikki and asking her to stir it all together as she preps the waffle maker. A moment later, Nikki hands the bowl and whisk back to Puffy and smiles a bit. "Thank you, Princess," Puffy says. "Chew welcomes," Nikki answers. Puffy starts making the waffles. After she hands Nikki one of her favorite stuffies to mess with while she cooks, Nikki babbles to her stuffed sheep and walks it along the edge of the counter, where she's sitting quietly. She smiles as Puffy finishes up and walks over to her with 2 plates of waffles, handing one to Nikki, then picking her up with her free hand. Puffy walks over to the table, carefully setting Nikki down in a chair and sitting down next to her. They eat their breakfast in almost complete silence, with Puffy's small compliments and Nikki's quiet babbles mixed in. And the last chapter for today, everyone. Chapter 40, CG Slimesicle Little Wilbur. Wilbur was often on his own when he was little, not that he blamed anyone but himself for that fact. He knew he had done bad things when he was big, and that's why people didn't like hanging out with him, but there was always one person he could go to when he got just a bit too lonely. Wilbur walked, or rather crawled, towards Las Nevadas. He knew that people would be swarming the streets and that he probably had a high chance of getting hit by a car, but he didn't really care. He just needed his Bubba back. He needed that tiny bit of comfort right now because today was rough. Eventually, Wilbur was inside the nation. Now he just needed to get to the Needle Point building where his caregiver worked as a bartender in the lower levels. Slowly but surely, he made his way there. Big Kim would hate that his palms were scratched up from the rough gravel and that his knees were sore from crawling, but it also kind of annoyed little him. He was beginning to get so uncomfy in his big boy clothes. Why hadn't he changed before he started out on this adventure? He paused for a moment, half a block away from the building, as tears started to well up in his eyes. He was in so much pain, and he just wanted to be held and comforted and loved. Wilbur stifled a cry as he continued on. He would be strong, or at least that's what he told himself. After a few more minutes, he ended up in the building. As he crawled through, past security and into the main area, the noise overwhelmed him. The tears that had been building in his eyes finally flooded over, falling down his face in silence. He uselessly wiped at his tears, crawling with blurry vision to find his caregiver. Slimesicle had been having a slow night, not many customers as they were all checking out the new attraction just down the street. He was cleaning a glass when he caught a flash of yellow. He doubled back and it was gone. He frowned. Was Wilbur really there, or was he seeing things? He placed the glass down and walked out from behind the bar, looking from person to person, face to face. Then he finally locked eyes on them. Wilbur was sitting on the floor, tears rolling down his face. Slimecicle's heart panged at the sight and quickly rushed over to the boy, scooping him up into his arms. "Shh, it's okay, baby. Bubba's got you," Slimecicle murmured as he gently wiped the tears away and kissed the little's forehead. "Let's get you out of those big boy clothes, Wilbur nodded, snuggling into his caregiver's warmth, happy he found him at last. "Bubba," he murmured as he struggled to keep his eyes open, suddenly exhausted by the day's events. "Shh, I'm not going anywhere, baby. You can rest now," Slimecicle murmured, reassuring the little. Wilbur nodded a bit, closing his eyes and drifting into a peaceful sleep. That's the end of this one for today. To all my tiny tots, little ones, big kids, tweens, teens, everyone in between, CGs, flips, and adults, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!